Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Adam Green here with knowmorenews.org. Today is Thursday, October 29th, 2020, and joining me today is a very special guest, the author of JFK to 9/11, 50 Years of the Deep State, From Yahweh to Zion, Jealous God, Chosen People, Promised Land, Clash of Civilizations, and his latest Essays on Jewish Power. Our God is your God too, but he has chosen us. He is Laurent Guyénot, and I'm butchering his name. He will pronounce it correctly for us. Thank you so much for being here. Laurent, tell us how to correctly, us Yanks, how to correctly pronounce your name, please.
Guyénot. Guyénot.
Guyénot. And your first name?
Yeah, but
the whole name?
my first name, you can say Laurent, that's fine.
Laurent. But how do you pronounce it in French?
Laurent.
Laurent,
yes.
Laurent Guyénot.
Guyénot.
Close enough. Well,
Yeah,
I'm going to call you Laurent,
change my name.
so to keep it simple for my brain. But thank you so much for coming on. We've been emailing for about a month. I've read both of your books. I got Yahweh to Zion on Kindle, but I got the hard copy here. It's a funny story. Laurent actually sent it to me because he's seen some of my videos and knew that we're on the same wavelength. And then I put it on the shelf and then bought it on Amazon, not realizing that I already have it. So one way or another, this interview was destined to happen, and I was destined to read this book, and I thought it was fabulous. It's a must read for everybody, as well as Yahweh to Zion. These are available on. You have Yahweh to Zion is on Amazon?
Yeah, I do. Still there.
In Kindle and paperback, still there for the time being. Maybe they'll you'll get on the radar from this interview and they'll get you down. Our God is your God too, but he has chosen us, also on Amazon. All the links will be down below. We're going to be discussing that today. Yeah. And then your first book, also wanted to point out, JFK 9/11. This one got banned from Amazon?
This was banned from Amazon 2 or 3 months ago, yeah.
2 or 3 months ago.
So you can get it from Progressive Press, or you can find it somewhere on PDF somewhere, I think.
Well, it popped up on Barnes & Noble for me. Is it still selling there?
Oh, yeah. Good.
Cool. All right. Well, Yahweh, I want to get you on to talk about Yahweh. But first, you're French. You're from France. We see in the news that French people are getting arrested and put in prison for inciting anti-Semitism. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Well, France is there's a lot of pressure in France coming from in France, the equivalent of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, would be the CRIF, CRIF, and they have a tremendous power, and there's different Jewish groups. The Jewish community is very powerful in France. And of course, we have these laws against, World War II revisionism. It's very severe. Among European countries, I think we are the country with the most powerful Jewish community and the most active Jewish community, trying to silence any criticism of Jewish people or Jewish elite, and also any revisionism of World War II. So Alain Soral is regularly attacked, and he has already accumulated something like 5 years of jail, but he, escaped to Switzerland. So for the moment, he's not in jail. We have one man called Hervé Rissen who was jailed just about a month ago. And this was because he wrote books, but he was not sentenced because of his book. He was sentenced because of one video he made about incest in the Jewish community.
Funny.
So
you write about that in your book.
Like it. They didn't like it at all. He's a very courageous man, Hervé Ries, and he writes. He's very critical of Jewish people and the Jewish community and Jewish influence. And then there is also another guy who is now living in France, but in England. But if he comes back to France, he will be put in jail for a few years too. His name is Renoir. I forgot his first name, but anyway, he's more into World War II revisionism. So yeah, it's quite tense, and myself, I don't have much trouble yet, but I one of these days. Anyway, I'm very careful about what I write.
We'll see if we can get you into some trouble today, maybe.
Okay.
Just kidding. Just kidding. We're going to be good goys.
No.
So I wanted to
just don't question me about the 6 million and this kind of subject, okay?
Well, we're going to talk about the biblical connections to the burnt offering of World War II that they hold so highly. So we'll see what the isn't Macron? Isn't he used to work for the Rothschilds? He worked for the Rothschild bankers.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. He's a banker and he worked for the Rothschild Bank. That's right. And he was somehow chosen by Jewish elite, especially one guy called Jacques Attali, who is very influential. He's been the advisor to about 5 or 6 presidents in France. And he brags that he chose Macron as the president. He is now old, and he likes to behave as a wise man, a prophet, and Macron is really for people who can see what's going on, behind the state, in the deep state. He's really the sign that we have gone very deeply into the hands of Jewish power.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw Macron was early to say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, so they're definitely on board with the Zionist New World Order.
Well, yeah, he's just repeating the lines of the CRIF, which is dictating, all these laws and all these laws to silence any criticism of Jewish elite. There's a very, very interesting video to see somewhere where you see the head, the president of the CRIF, who is holding Macron's hand, and because Macron is making a speech at the CRIF, and the president comes and holds his hand, and you can see Macron try to resist. And this is very symbolic of, the way the Jewish community has taken power, over the president and over our government in general. We have a very terrible government at this moment. There are really, all the ministers we feel are completely puppets, puppets, really.
Someone asked in the chat a good question. What do you think about the Yellow Vest movement, who they have been trying to smear as anti-Semitic? I haven't heard about them in the news for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not in the news ever since the coronavirus, thing came out. So they have not been allowed to gather. Well, I'm not a specialist on that, but basically my feeling is that the Yellow Vest was a very interesting, spontaneous movement, very surprising actually, and very hopeful, but of course lacking some serious leadership and some serious ideas. And they have been attacked, of course, accused of spreading anti-Semitism, because in France, anybody who criticizes the government or criticizes the system, of course, sooner or later start to talk about the Jewish power. So, but they might, come out again one of these days, but it has not led to, much. It is not a structured movement. It doesn't have, clear vision. People are just basically fed up, and they want to be able to get jobs, and they don't. And of course, we can say it has been, how would you say, not hijacked, but it has been Co-opted, yes, and controlled, and all the most interesting leaders have been pushed aside, and so. Well, it was a good sign that people are able to wake up, because now it's very depressing to see the French people wearing their mask everywhere and being basically very passive in front of the government fear-mongering, about the virus.
I gotta applaud you on your English. English as your second language. You speak really well, and you write even better in your books. So
yeah,
hats off to you for that. So before we get into the cult of Yahweh, just one more French question. Top news today: there is a beheading, a Muslim beheading in France. There was one, I think it was in France last week. Another beheading because a teacher showed Mohammed. And then in the news today, top news, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who has had some harsh words for Jews, says this. Ex-Malaysia Prime Minister, Muslims have right to, quote, kill millions of French people. He tweeted out today,
nice.
Muslims have a right to be angry and to kill millions of French people for the massacres of the past. Have you seen that? What do you think of that?
Well, that's something stupid to say, of course. It's absolutely ridiculous. But, about this story, what I can say is that it's very, very suspicious. The background is, this teacher showed to, I think, 12-year-old pupils, students, this caricature of Mohammed, these cartoons, coming from this kind of very provocative magazine called Charlie Hebdo. So the Charlie Hebdo story has many episodes, and you remember, of course, that how long ago was that? It must have been 2 or 3 years ago. Some drawers of this magazine were killed.
Yep.
And there has been also about 2 or 3 months ago another attack on this magazine. So the first thing to understand is that this magazine has been since the 1990s, I don't know exactly what year, was basically bankrupt and was bought and became a tool for the neocons to spread division, in France by attacking Muslims, offending Muslims, and then challenging, Christians and the French to support, the right of free speech, the right to offend the Muslims, in order to enrage Muslims and enrage the French against Muslim, in order to create division, and in a typical triangular manipulation, where they pull the strings here on both sides, So after the killing of these 6, I think, people working for Charlie Hebdo a few years ago, then just the day after, they had all these signs, Je suis Charlie, ready. You remember, I'm sure, those signs, Je suis Charlie. Everybody demonstrated in the street saying Je suis Charlie, which means I support this kind of very provocative, attack on the Muslim religion. I support, the offending Muslims. And Je suis Charlie also, many people felt Charlie is a little bit like an anagram of Israel. So, it kind of sounded like Je suis Israel, I am Charlie, I'm Israel. Anyway, ever since that time, a lot of people have felt that this was completely not exactly fake. Probably some people really did die, but the whole thing, I cannot even get into the detail, and I don't remember them very clearly. But the people who shoot, there were all kinds of videos, all kinds of elements that came out that indicated that this operation was under control. And then recently, this teacher stupidly showed this stupid, very not funny, offensive caricature of the prophet to children. And of course, some parents of some of his Muslim students started to protest, and then there was a little bit apparently of a kind of a little bit of controversy on Twitter, and then suddenly he was beheaded. The problem is, if you dig down, you realize it's very suspicious. There is a video going around of the and of course the guy who beheaded him, like always, he was shot dead by the police. He was not arrested. Ever since 9/11, that's the standard procedure. You don't arrest those terrorists, you just shoot them, and then there's no court case and
they
no
never
way
make it to trial. Exactly. Yeah.
No, they are shot, and this guy was shot, and there's a video where you hear him saying, "Hey, I'm just shooting the bee." The bee means marbles. So it sounds like, I cannot say for sure, but it sounds like they use the pretext of this controversy about this teacher to create a false flag decapitation, I believe, because there is also a video, a picture of the head of the teacher, which doesn't look real to me. So people can look around if it's still on the net.
I haven't seen
this whole story sounds very bizarre.
Well, it is interesting, and it seems like it's all Zionist designed, even if it's not a staged incident. Just the fact that all the Zionist wars in the Middle East, the Zionist using America to destroy Muslim countries, and then the leftist Bolshevik communist Jews in Europe open up the borders and say, everybody come here, all the refugees come in, and then the rabbis say this is a good thing, this means Moshiach is coming, and this is fulfilling prophecies, and then they incite the clash to cause chaos and break down the countries. And we had a Charlie Hebdo in America too. There was Pamela Geller, the Zionist neocon, who hosted a Draw Muhammad contest, and apparently some Muslims came and tried to shoot it up, but then they got shot. So they did the same thing here. And I want to point out that this is just basically following the Torah law, saying that you cannot depict the oneness of God. This is an idol. This is what Yahweh tells his chosen people, to knock down the altars and kill all the people of foreign gods, correct?
Sure. Yeah, of course, yeah.
And the double standard that these Zionist neocons will defiantly draw Muhammad, and they will try to be offensive and incite the Muslims, but then they pearl clutch and kvetch when anybody does a caricature or a cartoon of depicting a Jewish person. They lost their minds when they had the New York Times cartoon with Netanyahu and Trump. I just saw this anti-Semitism, Stop Anti-Semitism woman who got my channel banned. I saw an interview with her, and she was like, they had a Star of David on Netanyahu. I was so shocked. It's like, we can't even use the symbol of your flag to depict somebody in a political cartoon. But then it's so ridiculous. But do you have anything else to say, or should we move on to? Excuse me?
Yeah, I'm saying this double standard is very typical of Charlie Hebdo, because they, alternatively ridicule Islam, or they ridicule Christianity, but of course they would never, ever offend the Jews. So exactly. It's so obvious and so ridiculous.
Exactly. All right. So 25 minutes in, your book, Yahweh to Zion. People need to understand exactly who Yahweh is and what Yahweh does. Tell us about the cult of Yahweh and how Yahweh is psychopathic and the slave master type of relationship.
Okay. Well, maybe I can say a little bit about how I came to this aspect of the Jewish question, because very briefly, I started to become red-pilled, as people say now, with about 9/11, was about 10 years ago. And then from the time I understood that 9/11 was an Israeli job and not an inside job in a sense that Alex Jones is claiming, but since I understood that the neocons and all this power network who orchestrated 9/11 were basically crypto-Zionist, then I started to want to understand deeper where does that come from. And since I had a little bit of background in Bible studies, then I started to read the Bible in a new way and to see the connection between Yahweh and Zion. And realizing that basically Zionism is very biblical, at least if not from the time of Theodor Herzl, at least from the time of Ben-Gurion. And so I started to explore the connection and the connection between the biblical question and the Jewish question, and realizing finally the Jewish question, in my opinion, is mostly the biblical question. By that I mean that Jewish mentality is profoundly biblical. And so the biblical ideology is encapsulated or embodied, maybe that's not the wrong word, but in the God Yahweh. You know, if you understand the God Yahweh and his relationship to his people and his relationship to other peoples, to other nations, then you understand the core of the Jewish problem or the Jewish question. And, you know, it's so obvious to me today that when you read the Old Testament, what the Christians call the Old Testament, you find a picture of God which is really absolutely grotesque and appalling. And he is a psychopathic God in the sense that Yahweh, if you want to describe the personality of Yahweh, which is, which you can consider the kind of the symbolic personification of the Jewish mentality, in a sense. Okay, who is Yahweh? Yahweh is a God who first of all, he's the God of one person, of one people, who somehow appeared in somewhere in the north of Arabia and started to talk to Moses, and at some point declared he's the God of the universe, he's the creator of the universe. And so you see in the Jewish Bible, you see how this tribal God is somehow transformed into the God, the creator of the universe, which is the meaning of the title. Yes, our God is your God too, but he has chosen us. In fact, Yahweh is basically a tribal God. And at some point in history, most probably in Babylon, this tribal God was pretended, or the people who wrote the Jewish Bible pretended he's actually the creator of the universe. He's the father of all humankind, but for some reason he chose one people, and not any people, but the Jews. And for some reason he hates all other nations, and he wants to destroy them. And this is also corresponds to Yahweh's attitude to other gods. So before even he becomes he claims to become the God of the universe, he's a God of one people who hates basically all other gods and who wants to destroy all other gods. So that makes him a psychopathic God, in the sense that, if you're a man and you hate all other people around you, you're basically a psychopath.
Doesn't make you a very good neighbor.
Sorry?
It doesn't make you a very good neighbor.
No, exactly. So that's how Yahweh behaves towards other gods. He's always ordering his people to smash all the sanctuaries of other gods and slaughter the priesthood of other cults. And so, of course, this reflects to this is how he's educating his people, in the Jewish Bible. So. If you read especially Deuteronomy, you find that you can see very clearly that Yahweh has a program for his people, and his program is to to dominate the world, to enslave other nations, and
the nations that will not serve you shall perish. That's what he says.
Yeah, these kind of things. Yeah, and also you will suck the milk of other nations. All the treasures of all the nations will be yours, and I will give you this land where you will possess all the things that you did not build, you did not make, you did not create. There will be yours. So of course I don't believe Yahweh exists really, but he's a myth, but he's very powerful in the sense that he has educated, but he's just a symbolic representation of Jewish elite,
so the Abrahamic religions, there's no disputing the Abrahamic religions have shaped all of modern history, or not even modern history, the last 2,500 years basically.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling really to see how this very barbaric and bloody and religion has managed to enslave mentally billions of people. It's very scary, and it's when you start to realize this, when you start, like I did, and because I was basically, a Christian at some point, in the sense that I somehow accepted the basic paradigm that there was something special about the Jews, or maybe they were chosen by God. I never really clearly believed that, but anyway, when you start to realize the very nature of the Torah, you really wonder, how was it possible that billions of non-Jewish people could adopt it as their holy book, and not seeing that this book is full of hatred toward them, toward their people, their nation, toward every non-Jew.
So you often hear people say, well, it's not the Torah that's the problem. It's not the Hebrew Bible that's the problem. It's the Talmud and the Zohar. And what do you say to people who say that?
Yeah, I hear that a lot, because in France, I have a lot of give and take with Christian people, Catholic people, who are basically sensitive to the Jewish question, and basically, Judeo-critic, I would say, but they have this inability to understand that the problem is connected to the Bible, because they see the Bible as a holy book, and they consider, that God chose the Jews, but they failed because they did not recognize Jesus. So, but in the Bible, if you read it with the Christian glasses, you can see that it's full of prophecies of Jesus and so on. And you have to read it through the New Testament. That's always their answer. So basically, I tell them, well, you read it as you want, you put whatever glasses you want to read it, but the fact is the Jews don't read it through New Testament glasses, and what they read in it is exactly what is written on the first degree, But Christians have developed all kind of, allegoric or symbolic or second degree readings of the Torah, so they don't see what's really written in it, and so that's the problem. And then when they want to understand, well, what's the problem with the Jews? Well, they say, well, that's because they rejected Jesus, and then they created the Talmud, which is a perversion of the true Jewish religion. I'm not caricaturing, it's exactly what I hear from Christians. So it's very difficult to tell them. What I generally tell them is, look, you read the Bible as you want. I don't mind. You can when you read in the Old Testament, Yahweh tells Israel that they will rule the world. Well, the Christians read, God told the Christians that they will convert the whole world. Okay, well, that's fine. You read it as you want. But the question is, the Bible was written by the Jews, for the Jews, and it's read by the Jews, So the biblical ideology maybe in some way is not affecting directly the Christians, but it's affecting the Jewish community, and that's what we have to see, Mm-hmm. I mean, if the Jews started to read the Bible as the Christians do, well, okay, why not? But
so we often hear that Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism, or that the Torah only Jews, they're the good ones, they're okay, or they say that Zionism is a secular movement. Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism, some people try to say. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, you can be secular and biblical, because the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, isn't. You can look at it as a religious book, or you can look at it as just some kind of roman national, some kind of national mythology of Israel. And many Zionists who claim to be non-religious still are profoundly influenced by the Bible. This was not the case apparently of Theodor Herzl, and on that point, I like what Gilad Atzmon says about the early Zionists who were basically nationalists in the same way as other nations. But David Ben-Gurion, at least from his time, a completely different Zionism started. And David Ben-Gurion is a very good example, because he shaped the whole mentality of all the Israeli leadership after him. He is really the father of Israel.
I'm not sure. Sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure if I read it in your book, but I read recently that it's believed that they used Herzl as a secular front because they would never be able to convince the Christians that they were. The Christians would be suspicious that they were helping set up the Antichrist and fulfill the Jewish eschatology goals. So they kind of masked their religious agenda with a secular front. You think that's true?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, the Zionist project, or the Jewish project, is progressing always from different sides, and there is a secular side, there is a religious side, there is the nationalist movement, and then there is the internationalist movement, and all this somehow combines in the right moment. But I reread recently Theodor Herzl's book, and it's quite surprising to see that he had apparently not much understanding of Jewishness. I think Theodor Herzl was really a very assimilated Jew who somehow, at some point, actually believed that the only solution to the Jewish question was assimilation. Jews should convert to Christianity and finish being Jewish. Before he converted to Zionism, that's what he thought. He wrote it in his journal, and even in his book you can read it. But at some point he decided, no, let's create a Jewish nationality, and let's claim some land. Why not Uganda, or why not? He was not so much focused on Palestine. But anyway, after he was kind of the Zionist movement was taken over by a different kind of people, and
the Protestants,
people who were
you write that the Protestants Judaized Christianity.
Yeah, sure. But let me finish with David Ben-Gurion, because I think he's a very good example. David Ben-Gurion claims to be atheist. He doesn't believe in God. But he believes that the Bible is the blueprint. If you want to build a nation, you have to, everything is in the Bible. He made some remarks which are really amazing. He knew the Bible by heart. It's the blueprint. And of course, in the Bible there is Yahweh. But what's important for Ben-Gurion is not what Yahweh is, not Yahweh, but it's Yahweh's promise, Yahweh's project.
Covenant,
You can
blessing,
take
yeah.
away Yahweh. Sorry.
A covenant or
You can take
blessing.
away Yahweh and keep the program. And there are a few biographies of Ben Gurion, and one of them is called Prophet of Fire. So he, and every chapter is titled after a biblical quote. So this was to answer your question about Zionism being a secular movement. From the Jewish point of view, I think it doesn't really make so much difference if you're secular or you're religious, because Jewish elite have what's important is the program, or the kind of the kind of Jewish religion is basically an alliance. We talk about the alliance, the covenant. Covenant is the correct word in English, right? So it works as a covenant. So in the Bible, it's a covenant with God, but in reality, it's a covenant between elite Jews. They made a covenant.
The Levite scribes who actually wrote down the Old Testament, and the average Jewish person. That's what you're saying.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Like the Levite priests that wrote down the Bible, they're the ones that are controlling the masses of Jews in the relationship. That's what you're saying. Sorry to interrupt. Continue.
Yeah. I think, I try to develop an approach which makes, I try to make the difference. I think it's very important. Of course, I'm not the only one to think it's important, but between Jewish elite and the Jewish people. And in fact, the pattern of the relationship between the Jewish elite and the Jewish people is in the Bible too, because in the Bible, as you say, you have Moses and the Levites, who were actually originally, if you read in Exodus, they are some kind of bodyguard of Moses, and Moses rewards them after they slaughter all those who don't want to follow Moses. And that's the pattern. You always have in the Bible the Jews who rebel against their elite, their leaders. They say, no, why not let's make friends with other people, and then they get punished for that. Let's marry, let's take wives among other nations. Let's be friends with them. Let's eat with them. This is always a recurring pattern in the Bible. And then they get punished. Yahweh sends some plague, or Yahweh sends them some enemies, or the earth open and they fall in the middle, or all kinds of things like this. Or Moses ordered his Levites to slaughter them, whatever, So the pattern of the Bible is not the Jews against the nations. It's primarily the Jewish elite against the Jewish people, controlling them, trying to keep them separate from other people, making them paranoid, telling them, no, don't make friends with other nations. You think they're your friends, they're your enemies. If you make friends with them, you will lose everything. So it's a brainwashing program, which has been going on for 2,000 years. And just like Gilad Atzmon, for me, is a very important example. I think the only hope is that we, at some point, more and more Jews, start to realize they have been living into a mental prison. They have been enslaved by a mental prison, guarded by this psychopathic God. I don't know if I'm.
It's interesting when Jews assimilate, they eventually, they're persecuted for following the Torah, and then they blame the assimilationists and they blame the Jews for not following the commandments enough for when they're persecuted by Esau from the Gentile nations where they're scattered to. And then instead of going, oh, we were bad, we did these things, and having self-accountability, they blame the Gentiles and they say they scapegoat Esau and say he hates us for no reason. And then they double down on the same Jewish practices that got them persecuted in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It reminds me of one of the videos you made about Esau. It was very Jacob and Esau. That's very interesting because it's true. This story is a paradigmatic, very symbolic of the problem. And actually, in the story of Jacob and Esau, there are many, many interesting points. As you mentioned already, it starts with Jacob dressing up as Esau and telling his father, "I am Esau," in order to get the blessing. And of course, this is very symbolic of what we call crypto Judaism, Jews who claim to assimilate, but in reality, who remain secretly loyal to their own people. And of course, the problem of assimilation is very complicated because in European history and American history, we have seen many Jews who apparently are very assimilated, but not to the point of marrying non-Jews, generally, depends. And in fact, they remain narrowly loyal to their own people. So, assimilation is also dissimulation from this point of view. So it's very complicated because there are many different levels of assimilation, and there is sincere assimilation and fake assimilation. And the Jacob and Esau story is symbolic of that, and also, of course, as you say, of the fact that Jacob cheated Esau, but cannot understand why Esau is angry at him, and this is the mental blindness of Jews in general. They know somehow that they have much power, that they control, the Gentiles, but they cannot really understand why the Gentiles are angry at them. And so they believe the Gentiles are anti-Semitic, and this is some kind of sickness inherited from their ancestor or whatever. And therefore, they have to protect themselves against anti-Semitism. And in order to protect themselves against anti-Semitism, they have to get more power in order to control the Gentiles. And so there is this vicious circle where Jews in general, not only elite, the Jewish community in general, is constantly afraid of anti-Semitism, especially since their elites are constantly repeating to them that they are living among anti-Semites. And therefore, this is used to legitimate Jewish power. Jewish power is necessary in order to control the anti-Semite. And of course,
to prevent another Holocaust.
Yeah.
Or another Purim, you could say. Let me comment on a few things. The Jacob Esau story, it's such an important, so important to understand how crucial it is, that story, to understand the whole Jew, non-Jew dynamic. Jacob was the first crypto Jew. He deceived. It's God created evil, so it's evil. You can use evil for good causes. This is what they believe. So it's his deception of Esau is a good thing. And also, this is interesting. I see the archetype for predictive programming in the Jacob and Esau story, because first Jacob offered the bowl of lentils, and he got him to sign on and give away his birthright before he went and tricked Isaac for the blessing. So it's kind of like how they kind of get you to sign on and comply and agree with something before they actually do it to you. And because we see predictive programming over and over again. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's true. So deception is really the essence of Yahweh. If you look at this story and this I mean, if your God teaches you that you have to deceive the Gentiles, because for the Jews, Esau is, of course, means Rome, or, in Middle Age it meant Rome, that means Christians. Today it means basically all the Gentiles. So, if your God tells you you have to deceive the Gentiles and I will bless you, and, how can we blame the Jews for, I mean, how can this is where the Christians, need to understand something, because Christians often blame the Jews for for deceiving the Christians, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they learn that from their Bible,
Yeah.
So you cannot blame them to behave like that, and at the same time praise the Bible as a book from God. So everything that the Christians blame the Jews for example, they blame them from being separate. They don't want to assimilate. Well, that's what Yahweh tells them in the Bible. That's exactly the message of Yahweh to his people. So Jews are being very faithful to the message of the Bible, whether they're religious or not doesn't really matter. So this is a kind of how do you say, double kind of double bind,
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, exactly. Cognitive dissonance, right.
I think it's interesting, the Jacob and Esau story. They believe in reincarnation, and it actually goes back even before Jacob and Esau to Cain and Abel and to the creation myths in Kabbalah. But if they believe, like they always say, that Gentiles are born anti-Semitic, that it's a natural law that we hate them and we don't even know why, and that there's Amalek and Esau is reincarnated, and every generation tries to exterminate them, so they're justified in defending themselves to rise and kill first. So if Gentiles are born hating Jews and born anti-Semitic, how can they get rid of anti-Semitism without getting rid of the Gentiles?
Well, they have to dominate them. That's the point, They are chosen to dominate the Gentiles and to rule the world, basically. And, this is very clear in the prophet, which is actually the favorite prophet of Ben Gurion. He quoted from that book a lot, from Isaiah. Is that how you pronounce in English, Isaiah? Yeah.
Yes.
Who said the law will come from Zion, and all the treasures of the nation will come to Zion. Ben Gurion, I think it was 1962, he said, he prophesied that in 25 years, this prophecy will be realized, and Jerusalem will be the center of the new United Nations, and the law will come from Zion. So, I think this vision is basically the essence of Jewishness. What does it mean to be Jewish? Well, if you ask Jews, they often say, well, it means to be different and superior. They might not use the word superior, but they are destined to
be hated. That's what they believe. They're destined to be hated and persecuted. They have a persecution victim / superiority megalomaniacal complex.
Yeah. And they often believe, why do Gentiles hate them? Was because they are jealous. So, they believe they're superior, and therefore other people are jealous of their superiority.
I just got an email like that the other day saying, I'm just jealous.
Yeah, amazing. And actually I've heard also even non-Jews say this, that why do Jews are better at everything. We have to accept it, And so you don't need to be jealous. You accept they're better. They have more Nobel prizes. They have a higher IQ. Well, that's what I answer to that in general is, psychopaths also have a higher IQs, So higher IQ is something which is can be a sign of many different things. It's not necessarily a sign of a moral superiority.
Speaking of moral superiority, they claim that it's their destiny, their purpose on earth is to be a light unto the nations, and heal the Gentiles, heal the world with their ethical monotheism. That's the Dennis Prager term. Let's talk about real quick, if you could explain the main patriarch, Abraham. I mean, we talked about Jacob. His grandson is already devilish, deceptive enough. This is their patriarch. Their main patriarch, the Abrahamic covenant. Tell us about Abraham, as you write in your book, and his half sister / wife, and what he did with her.
About what?
Abraham's wife. What did the stories of what Abraham did with his wife
You mean in Egypt?
in Egypt and somewhere else too with another king, wasn't it?
Um, I don't know exactly what story you're referring
Oh, I
to.
thought you wrote about this in your book. Abraham gave off his wife to the Pharaoh as a concubine.
Yeah, right.
So this is using women to attain power with Gentile leaders. Just like we saw Sacha Baron Cohen the other day do that. Just what like we see Epstein blackmailing our politicians. It's literally in the Patriarch did it twice.
Yeah,
with his
that's true.
half-sister slash wife.
Yeah, that's true. There is also this kind of pattern in the Bible, and it also connects with the story of Esther, using women in order to, I mean, putting Jewish women in the bed of the Gentile king. So yes, Abraham did that with his wife, who was actually his half sister, actually. Yeah? And there is also much to say about the very strong endogamic.
Lot and his daughters. The story of Lot and his daughters, right?
Yeah, and Esther, the story of Esther is somehow similar. And in rabbinic writing, I heard that Esther is considered to be not only the niece of what's his name, Mordecai, I think,
yes.
the Jew who supposedly plotted against, who
defended
Esther is the niece of Mordecai.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, but according to rabbinic writing, she was also his wife, whom he sent into the bed of the Persian king in order to influence him into protecting the Jews against the evil Persians, and finally condemning the sons of his advisor and leading to a slaughter of 75,000 persons, which is celebrated at the feast of Purim.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's all kinds of patterns like this. When you really study, you understand. You see where the Jewish problem is coming from. Because
then,
the Esther paradigm is also used. You can find surely many other examples. Actually, I was planning to write an article on the Esther pattern, because
that's what happened in World War II, and that's what's about to happen right now.
Yeah,
I've got so many clips of rabbis comparing Hitler to Haman and Germany to Amalek. And then now look at what we're seeing in the news. Anti-Semitism is exploding everywhere. White supremacist anti-Semites are taking over. And we're being persecuted. We have to do something. It's Purim story, 100%. And the lessons that they learn from their stories that they act on and behave, and it shapes their attitudes. Like, could you explain the Joseph story and how it's a theme that it's a mitzvah for Jews to get close to power and to manipulate Gentile kings, Cyrus as well?
Yeah, the Joseph story is another interesting story. I found some scholar who was talking about this Joseph's. You're talking about Joseph, right? Yes, Joseph's story. She said, well, in the Bible you have stories. It's like the story of Robin Hood told from the side of the sheriff of Nottingham. So the biblical heroes are anti-heroes from our European heroic culture. Our culture is fundamentally heroic. We admire people who have noble ideals, and the character of Joseph, who is a biblical hero, is exactly the model for many rich Jews of today, in the sense that he was a slave and he was put in prison for some reason, and through his intelligence or his ability to interpret dreams or whatever, but that could be any other kind of any kind of intellectual capacity. He became a minister, and he became in charge of the grain storage or stock. He today that would be being in charge of the finance of the kingdom. And what he did is basically it's written in plain language in the Bible. He enslaved all the peasants. First, he stored the grain so that when the bad years came, the peasants had to pay him to buy some grain for him. And then at some point they had no money left, so they had to sell themselves, to sell their farms, and then to sell their own lives and to become slaves. And through this, Joseph became rich, and he made his own tribe rich. And therefore, he was blessed by Yahweh. He's a great man from the biblical point of view. So again, if the Jews have such models, why we cannot blame them to be like the way they are. What we should really understand is the Bible is a very deeply immoral book, and this is why I feel we are in trouble, because the Christians cannot see this. They cannot see this, and if Christians cannot see this, who will? It's a problem. It's a deep problem that Christians cannot see that the Bible is fundamentally immoral, and he is the model for all the Jewish immorality in the world.
And the Talmud is commentary on the Torah and doesn't really change its fundamental lessons, I should say. It probably expands on them and makes them worse, if anything. But you're mentioning morals in the Torah, and the Torah is the law. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Because we always hear we wouldn't have morals if it wasn't for the Hebrew Bible. So is there morality? Does Yahweh teach his chosen people morality or something else?
Well, in fact, no, not at all. And even some Jews would say, in the Torah, there is no question of good and bad. There is only, in the sense of, of course, you have the 10 Commandments, but the 10 Commandments, are very basic, and they're not very
do
unique.
Not kill another Jew is what it means.
It says do not kill, but then Yahweh, he all the time tells, kill all the women, all the men, all the women, all the children. Don't leave even an animal alive. When he orders, for example, Joshua to conquer the cities of Canaan. So. But basically, the fundamental law in the Torah, it has nothing to do with being a good man or a bad man. It has only to do with keeping the law. And what is the law? The essence of the law is don't mingle, don't associate to other people. Keep Yahweh's commandments, and Yahweh's commandments is the most important. Is don't intermarry, keep the race pure. And don't ever worship other gods. So exclusivity of the cult and endogamy. That's the essence of. It has nothing to do with being a good man or a bad man, And if you don't follow, if you don't keep these laws and separate from other nations, you will be punished. If you keep the law and you keep the race pure, the people pure, you will be blessed. That's the only thing, that's the only morality of the Bible. So, and plus, you have all these examples that tells in the Bible, not just in the Talmud, that you can cheat the Goyim. There's no problem. In fact, you should.
It's a good thing.
Just like Jacob or just like Joseph, or just like so many other models who basically cheat the Goyim, enslave them. That's that's not a problem.
I don't think there's any disputing that Yahweh does not teach his chosen people good and bad, right and wrong. Right and wrong is following Yahweh's commandments or not following them. And these commandments are basically use usury to enslave, lend to other nations, but do not borrow, and then rule over them, but do not let them rule over thee. Yahweh tells his chosen people to conquer your neighbors and enslave or exterminate them. And this is what they're taught. And they're believed that God has cursed the Gentiles because they're evil, they're impure, they're the darkness, but the Jews will be cursed if they don't follow the commandments.
Yes, exactly. And we always have to remember that Yahweh is only some kind of personification of the Jewish elite. So the way the Jewish community functions today, maybe they don't believe in Yahweh, but that doesn't make any difference. Their mental mind frame is trained to obey their leadership. Which to obey their leadership means to obey Yahweh. It's the same thing. So the Jewish community is functioning like this. Their leadership tells them, if you assimilate, you are making a mistake, because anyway the Goyims are anti-Semite and they will never accept you as their friend. So you have to keep separate, and we have to keep our solidarity, and we have to keep together. And they are constantly, brainwashing the Jews about anti-Semitism to keep them separate. The essence of Jewishness is separateness. And that's what the Jewish elite are constantly doing to the Jews in general. And the way to do that is, of course, create anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism, is never enough. So you have to create, you have to enrage the Muslims, to make them scream against Israel, or you have to create it when it's not there. And there are many examples, of course, of fake anti-Semitic attacks. I mean, in France, we have them all the time. Those Nazi sign on the Jewish cemeteries and so on. And we never know who paint them on their cemeteries.
Well, we know who benefits from it, and they've been busted so many times with their hoax hate crimes, and which is why nobody should take them seriously when they do this stuff. Next question I wanted to ask is prophecy magic. You write in your book about how they do. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like how they kind of use prophecy to act like they have superpowers, sort of, right?
Yeah. Well, prophecy is, I think, one of the most misunderstood thing, but they like to appear as prophets. We have many older Jews today who like to behave as prophets, and the prophecy in the Bible is, we could say, predictive programming, right? That's what we say. So what's a prophecy? It's just a program, you decide this will be like this. And if you work, intensely and collectively toward that end, you might succeed in making it happen. And you might say, well, that's because Yahweh, Yahweh wants it, so the prophets prophesize. But I have a feeling that, as I said, many intelligent Jews, many, and of course many Jews are very intelligent. They very, very well understand this, that if you work towards one goal in a collective way and in a very, very long turn, from generation to generation, you will achieve that goal. So that's how they understand prophecy. Prophecy is a plan. It's a plan. It was planned like this, thousands of years ago, and we've been working on it, generations after generation. So we will achieve it. It has nothing to do with God for many Jews. It has only to do with the superiority of Jewish solidarity, because again, Jewishness by essence is a covenant. And covenant means basically conspiracy. What does covenant mean? It means basically we have conspired together, from generation to generation to achieve world domination.
A promise or an agreement, and I also see the Torah and Zohar, Talmud, all of it as the blueprint, as the formula for world domination in this world. You talk about the differences between how Jews believe about creating a heaven on earth with their earthly anointed king Moshiach and dominance over the Gentiles, whereas the Christians believe in an afterlife is what's important.
Yeah.
And how they think in terms of millennia. They have this as a millennia agenda. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, one thing I realized is, and I was quite surprised to realize this from reading the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and also from reading books about it, is that actually in the Hebrew Bible, there is no notion of the afterlife, of the individual afterlife. And when I say this to Christians, they would say, no, it's not possible, because, the afterlife is the essence of Christianity, and the Old Testament and the New Testament is the same. So, and of course, they can quote here and there a few books from the Old Testament where they talk about the afterlife. But, and it's true, there are a few sources in the Old Testament which talk about an afterlife, an eternal spirit, an immortal spirit. But these books are actually from the Hellenistic period, from the late period, and they are influenced by the Hellenistic, basically Platonic or Hellenistic metaphysical representation. But mostly, and you can find many Jewish scholars who admit it, the Old Testament does not admit of an immortal soul for individuals. And some people would say, well, that's because it's very old. It dates from a time when people did not believe. And that's not true. That's not true. It's more a denial. It's an aggressive denial of the fundamental religious beliefs of all the peoples around the world, even in very ancient time, that there is another world. There is another world where people go, or maybe not everybody goes. There are different ways to, but the belief in another world is basically universal. But it's strongly denied in the Hebrew Bible, and in my view, it's actually the most important point to understand Jewishness, materialism. It's fundamentally, in a metaphysical sense, materialistic, and therefore there is only this world. There is no other world. And it reminds me, to explain why this is so fundamental. You could take, for example, the philosophy of Leo Strauss, who was the mentor of many neoconservatives. Leo Strauss was an admirer of Machiavelli. And he explained in his book on Machiavelli that the reason Machiavelli is such a genius, is because Machiavelli does not believe in an immortal soul, and therefore he is the perfect patriot, because he believes you can do. There's no moral limit to what you can do for your country. And you don't need to be afraid to be damned or to go to hell, because there is no hell, no paradise, whatever. So there's no limit to what you can do for your country. And that's the Jewish mentality, because the only thing eternal in the Bible, and from the point of view of many Jewish scholars, is Israel. So there is a collective immortality. There is no individual immortality. And now if you contrast this with Christianity, then you end up also seeing Christianity's richness, because Christianity is coming from the Hellenistic culture, where the afterlife was so important. The immortality of the heroes and whatever.
I've heard that the afterlife started, and good and evil started, with Zoroastrianism.
Yes, probably. Well, I think it dates from before, but Zoroastrianism was definitely uh, uh, uh,
Well, the Egyptians
anyway
believed in
very
afterlife
influential
too. Yeah,
in
sorry.
the world. Yeah. But the weakness of Christianity is one of the weaknesses of Christianity is that it's metaphysically individualistic. There is only individual afterlife. You have one. Everybody has. Each person has one soul, and each person has one salvation. You don't save yourself collectively. And so there is also no ethnic solidarity emphasized within Christianity. In fact, Christianity, by essence, is a globalism, a globalist ideology. It,
Universalism.
it's
Universalistic.
yes, it's universalistic and individualistic, and therefore, for those two reasons, is anti-nationalistic, anti-national, or it's in fact, if it's not anti, at least it downplays, any kind of ethnic solidarity. And so the vulnerability of Gentile and particularly of Christians, that means white people, is that their religion taught them to have no ethnic solidarity, and so we are now faced with people who are the exact opposite, which of course raised the question if Christianity was not created for that very purpose by the Jews, as some people would think.
Well, they say that Christian is neither Greek nor, I forget the whole verse, but and you're
Yeah,
circumcised in the
that's
heart. Excuse me. Go ahead.
yeah. Paul, that's a quote of Paul that
Hmm.
there are neither Greeks nor Jews nor men nor women actually also.
Yeah,
It's,
it's interesting the concept of the contrast between Christianity and Judaism, where Christians have like a personal, individual relationship with Jesus or God, and Jews kind of have like a a collective relationship with Yahweh. So I do see that dynamic, and also you write in your book that. That they think in a collective tribal consciousness to a degree, and that they believe the afterlife, you live on with their descendants, and they believe in reincarnation as well. So the contrast in the theology there and its implications is interesting.
well, reincarnation is not really in the Bible. It's in the Kabbalah and
Kabbalah, yeah.
maybe somewhere in the Talmud. I'm not sure how many people believe in reincarnation. In the Bible, it would be more like ethnic. Um, you live only through your collective identity. There is no. And in fact, even other nations too. In the Bible is a story of nations against nations. Of course, there are individuals here and there, especially in the story of Israel. But apart from Israel, there are only nations, almost no individuals.
Right.
So
Well,
it's
well,
a
it's
very
the chosen priestly nation above all the other Goyim nations, and they're all evil, impure, wicked. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So this is in fact the strength of Judaism, of Jewishness. If we realize this, and we maybe have a chance to realize that we have lost any kind of ethnic solidarity. And even for the last 100 years, we've been killing each other in Europe. European nations have been committing suicide, not being able to recognize that the British and the German, should never have made it, all those bloody wars against each other. And so, because we have complete. I'm thinking about this very deeply now because I feel individualism is really a disaster. But it's coming from Christianity. Individualism is coming from Christianity.
And it's coming
Christianity
from cultural Marxism too, and
also.
Freud and like McDonald writes about so much in his book. He talks a lot about the individualists issues.
Yes, of course it's true, but yeah, it's true. But what I mean is that any nation can only survive if it has some religious foundation, and that means a religion that at least includes nationality. And to some degree, Christianity can do that in some case. For example, in Russia, Christianity is very national because it's a national church. So in this case, if you take Russia today, you see a Christianity which is fulfilling a role to strengthen the national sense of people. But that's because Russian Christianity is a little bit special. It's a national church, but
it's a KGB
it's
church, isn't it?
Sorry?
Isn't it a KGB church as well?
Well, maybe to some degree, but I think at this moment, if we look at the Russian nation, we can see some positive, we can see some patriotic spirit, and the patriotic spirit is necessary if you want to, if you want to create a collective spirit. Which means a social organism. We don't have in our European nations, and I think in America it's not much different, any kind of a sense of being an organic whole. And Israel, as always, for thousands of years, thought of itself as an organism, a collective organism. This is very foreign to our own thinking today. There has been in Germany, for example, in the Romantic period, in reaction often actually to Christianity to some degree, the nationalist movement in Germany in the early 20th century or in the end of the 19th century was trying to create a new awareness that a nation needs to. A nation has a soul. A nation needs to have a spirit, and this led, of course, to national socialism. National socialism was coming from that understanding that a nation needs to have a strong identity, and this identity, to some degree at least, of course, in the National Socialist case was a bit extreme, is also racial. The racial aspect of it is part of the formula to create a nation.
Well, I don't know if I'm very clear,
but yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Is that we can criticize Israel for this aspect, but we should also recognize that this is their strength and this is our weakness. That we don't have any kind of national spirit like they do, and of course they have destroyed the spirit in the Gentile nations.
Yeah, Bjerknes talks about how they believe that Yahweh is a jealous God. He wants to destroy all the other nations' gods, and you write in your book about how that's another contrast, is that Yahweh is a jealous God, the only God, although destroying other gods kind of implies that there is other gods, but all the other cultures around the time, their gods were tolerant and they believed in polytheism. Can you explain that, a little bit of that, instead of me regurgitating your book?
Yeah, what I think the one important thing to understand about the Bible, how it was made, is we have to reverse the story. The way the Bible was written is the opposite of the way it is read today, because the way it is read, the story as we read it in the Bible is that God created the universe, and then at some point he chose the Jews, right? But historically the process was the exact opposite. In the beginning there is Yahweh, who is a national God, even in fact a tribal God, a very bloody God. a volcano god, exactly, coming from a volcano. I have one chapter about this aspect. And then in some of the books of the Bible, you can still see very clearly that in the early days, there was absolutely no notion that this God was the creator of the universe. I mean, this was completely unthinkable. He was just a very special national god who hated all other gods. And that made him very special because, as you said, most religions teach that, the volcano god, most religions teach that you have to respect other cults. I mean, there are all kinds of national gods, but basically Yahweh is very unique in his profound hatred for all other gods. The tendency in the ancient world was for peoples who wanted to trade with each other, they had to recognize each other's gods. And then there was this process which a German historian described very well, Jan Assmann. He explained, that in the ancient world, a nation who has several gods, and then their neighbors have other gods, and in order to trade, they try to make correspondence between their gods. For example, this god for us represents the sun, and your sun god has another name, but in fact he is the same. So there was this tendency to universalize polytheism. But the project of Yahweh is exactly the opposite. Other gods do not, has to be destroyed, which means they exist, as you say. And then I tell in one of the in the book of Joshua, that's where you can very clearly see that Yahweh is always called Yahweh, the God of Israel. And when some other nations speak to the Israelites, they say Yahweh your God, and the Israelites say Yahweh our God. And there is nowhere a notion that Yahweh is the God of the universe. And that's why Yahweh in the book of Joshua is telling the Israelites, go and kill all these other people. If Yahweh was the God of the universal God, he would tell Joshua, go and convert those nations. There's absolutely no notion to convert the nations. You have to go and kill them all and steal their land. And the funny thing is, in the book of Joshua, there's only one person who at some point says Yahweh is the God of heaven and earth. And the expression, the God of heaven and earth, is reminding of Persian Zoroastrianism. It's a Persian expression. So it means Yahweh is the universal God. There's only one person who says this in the book of Joshua, and she's a prostitute. And the story is that she's a prostitute from Jericho. And there are two Jews who, they want to destroy the city of Jericho, but first they send two spies in the city, and these spies sleep at this prostitute. Her name is Rahab, and it's not very clear. There are different layers in the story because in the ancient layer, Rahab is afraid and makes a deal with them, and she opens one door of the city so that the Israelites can come in, and in exchange she has they spare her life. But then there's somebody probably added one sentence in the story, and Rahab says, well, I will help you because I believe Yahweh is the God of Israel, is the God of heaven and earth, sorry. Yahweh, your God, is also the creator of the universe. And the funny thing is that in my Catholic Bible, there is a footnote where it says, well, Rahab is somehow an allegory for the church because she's a pagan who accepted the Jewish God as the God of heaven and earth, the universal God. And I found that very funny because in a way it's true. The church is like the prostitute in the city of Jericho. The church opened the door to the Gentile city to let the Jewish God in the city. That's why I also say, the Old Testament is the Trojan horse in the Gentile world, because Christianity imported, the Torah into our world. And so it's a little bit like, the prostitute of Jericho.
Interesting. Did you write about the prostitute of Jericho in your book? I don't recall hearing that.
I wrote about it I did in the last book. Our God is your God too, but He has chosen us.
Okay, I'll have to reread it. I do have notes where it says that you say that the Yahwehism in the Old Testament is a Trojan horse, and you say it makes it vulnerable. Christianity vulnerable to a Jewish takeover, essentially, in the end times, which is what we're witnessing right now with the Zionist Christian control over America and them. Isn't it interesting that basically the end times blueprint for Christians first requires helping Israel fulfill many of their end times agenda?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the process of, as you mentioned earlier, the Christianity has been Judaized. The whole history of Christianity can be seen as a process of Judaification, in the sense that early Christianity, represented mostly by Orthodox Christianity today, is maybe the least Jewish-friendly. And then with Catholicism, it became a very legalized, legalistic religion. Catholicism became very legalistic, which is Jewish in a sense, because the Torah is the law. It's a legalistic religion. And then in Protestantism, we have now, especially in the Puritan version, which became the root of American Christianity, we have a Christianity which is very centered on the Old Testament and the promise of Yahweh for Israel and so on. So, as you say, Christian Zionists are just crypto Zionist in some way.
The Pope also is on the anti-Semitism agenda. He says he wants to erase anti-Semitism from humanity, and I think he acknowledges that they're the chosen people now as well, or maybe that was Vatican II that they changed that.
Yeah, he said something one time which I found very true. In fact, he says inside every Christian there is a Jew. But if you really think about it, it's true. Inside every Christian there is a Jew, because not only because Jesus is Jewish, that's not so much a problem, because he was Galilean, so you can always say, well, he was not really Jewish. So, but that's not the problem. The problem is the Old Testament. Inside Christianity there is the Old Testament, and inside Christianity there is also the very deep belief that God chose the Jews. Christians believe that God chose the Jews. Of course, they say, well, yeah, but they messed up, and he changed his mind. But that doesn't make much difference. When you are in front of a Jew, I remember this when I was studying at school. I remember we had a Jewish teacher, and as I remember back, I realized that we have this it's very deep within Christians to have some kind of respect for Jews, because they have been chosen by God. Maybe they messed up, but still they're so special. God chose them,
Even when you say that they messed up, you're still saying that you're validating the idea that they were chosen.
Exactly. And that's the problem. You can say, yeah, they messed up. They should have recognized Jesus, which in fact doesn't make any sense, because they should have crucified Jesus. I mean, those Jews who crucified Jesus, they were absolutely loyal to the spirit of the Old Testament. There's no question about it. But that's another story. The fact is that Jews have an incredible symbolic power in the eyes of the Christians. They have been chosen by God. This we believe this, and it's so deeply ingrained in our thinking that we cannot help acknowledging Jews as superior, even we don't like them, or we. And if you compare that to the problem, so because of this, the Jewish question today is very different from what it was before Christianity, because there was always a lot of problem with Jews in the Roman Empire, for example. But never did the Romans believe that God chose the Jews. So they could deal with the Jews in a much rational way. We just cannot deal with the Jews in a rational way because we have this incredibly irrational belief. So the Romans believed that the Jews are parasitic people, but the Romans could see that this is because of their religion. Their religion is make them like that. The Romans didn't have so much a racial approach, to the Jewish question. They believed the Jews were antisocial because that's their religion. Their God is a psychopathic God, and they believe in this psychopathic God who makes them psychopathic people. If you have a psychopathic God, you become a psychopathic people. But we Christians cannot see this, and this is the simplest way to. This is the simplest truth, and we cannot see this because we believe Yahweh is not a psychopathic God. We believe Yahweh is the God, the creator of the universe, and we believe he chose the Jews. We don't really believe it today. I don't believe it. You don't believe it. But generally, we have this, it's part of our collective unconscious somehow, So we have, that's why I feel we really very much have to identify the problem within the Bible, and then realize how evil, the Bible lesson is.
Well, I'm already seeing in the chat, I got a comment saying that, well, we're talking about Christians that aren't the real Christians, and that real Christianity is anti-Jewish, and that it's just the Zionists and the Jews hijacked Christianity in the last 100 years. What do you think of that?
Well, the whole thing about what is true Christianity, what is not true Christianity, to me, it doesn't really make much sense because, I can say, well, I'm a Christian because my Christianity is true Christianity. And I can honestly say I'm a Christian because I admire, the Jesus story is very moving. So I feel, very close to Jesus. And so I can claim I'm a true Christian and the other. But, that doesn't lead us very far. So, of course, I do agree that there is also a positive. The story of Jesus, if you summarize it, is the story of a man who identified the problem of Jewish power and stood up to it and died for it. So in this sense, that's a very powerful model.
He reformed it also. He reformed.
Sorry?
He reformed the temple Judaism.
Yeah, well, yeah, but if you boil down the story in a very, to the very core, it's a man, whether he was Jewish or not, that's debatable, but he stood up against, he identified, the evilness of Jewish power, and he denounced it publicly. And he was actually not killed by the Jews, which is also very, very interesting. He was denounced to the Gentile power who crucified him. So the Romans crucified him, which is very typical also of the way Jewish power works. They don't do they don't get their hands dirty. They manipulate Gentile power to persecute their enemies. They manipulate America to destroy their enemies in the Middle East. So in this sense, the story of Jesus, of course, is very powerful, and you can look at it in many ways as being anti-Jewish. That's true. But so what? When you've said that, what you mean is that everybody can look at this story as he wants. That's not the problem. What is true Christianity, what is not true Christianity, for me is not a very useful question, because Christianity evolved like all religion. Islam also evolved. What is true Islam? It's the same question. You can say the true Islam is a pacifist religion, but others would say no, true Islam is a religion of terrorists. It doesn't make a
conquest.
Yeah, so everybody has the Christianity he wants, I don't mind. My purpose is to try to identify the weaknesses of our civilization and our collective, beliefs.
All right. I want to wrap it up here before we go too long. I told you an hour and a half, but last topic to discuss. We're seeing Trump and Kushner make peace in the Middle East with the Abrahamic Accords. We're seeing the rollout of the Chabad Noahide laws. Nations around the world banning anti-Semitism and moving their embassies to Jerusalem. Talk of the Third Temple. Crack down on anti-Semites or Amalek, which must be destroyed. Talk of Moshiach. What do you see unfolding in the next Trump term? Do you think Trump's going to win? What is the world going to look like in the next 10 years in your eyes? Are they going to fulfill this agenda?
I'm very pessimistic, but I try to be optimistic. I try to find hope, but I don't have hope, as I made it quite clear. I don't have hope in Christianity, which is at least as much part of the problem as it can be part of the solution. And about Trump, I don't know. I learned a lot from your videos, and you really influenced my viewpoint of Trump, because I was more pro-Trump in the past, and now I understand your viewpoint. But still, I do believe that it would be better for Trump to win. It would be better for the world if Trump won. Right. Yeah. So I agree with you. I'm a bit unsure about Trump, let's say. I think you're right on basically many points you speak about on Trump. But like many other people, like Kevin McDonald actually recently wrote an article why it's important that Trump wins. So I kind of agree with him too. I think politics is the art of choosing the less evil. Trump is definitely not the best, but if you compare him to Biden, I have a feeling he is less evil than Biden. But I don't know. That's just I'm not. That's not a field where I feel I have much to add or much to
Right.
to say.
Well, you like focusing on the religious aspects as I do, and not so much the left-right politico game. And what I just see is that the Zionists have always used the threat of Bolshevism and communism, which is just the left-hand path that they also control at the highest levels, to make people support the Zionist agenda and the Zionist camp. So even though Trump appears like he's better than the crazy SJW communists that are anti-America, anti-free speech, anti-gun, everything that we hold dear, still I think ultimately Trump is going to be completely disastrous. He's going to end up doing many of the same things. He's not going to do anything about censorship. In fact, he endorses censorship and will help. His cabinet will intensify the censorship. Possibly, I think he's the choice of Zion ultimately, and Zog is the main problem. So that's why I think voting the lesser of two evils in this instance is really still, the kiss of death.
I agree, but I think in France, Alain Soral, with whom I'm quite close. Maybe you've heard of him, no? Alain Soral. Alain Soral. He's the leading figure in France of the anti-Zionist groups. He has he's the most influential person on our side. Everything I say basically is in agreement with what Soral says, and he made very good points about the dialectical way that Jewishness works. So they always work from different sides. So there is this left-wing immigrationist, pro-immigration, Jewish intellectuals, on one side, and then on the other side there is now a growing movement of what Alain Soral called national Zionist, the national Zionist, who are nationalists, who are supporting people like Trump, or in France people like Marine Le Pen or so on, in a sense that is compatible with the interests of Israel. And those two groups of Jewish people are often fighting each other, but that's basically like a theater. It's not a real fight. It's just they're kind of creating a dialectical process which they are engineering in order to direct it to the end result that they want. So I think Trump is, as you say, not better, but he's on this nationalistic side, which at this moment is perhaps preferable to the neoconservative side, which destroyed the Middle East. I mean, I feel we should not forget that Trump stopped, the destruction of Syria, for example. I mean, maybe it was not Trump, but
I think maybe there's more going on behind the scenes, and there's some 4D chess going on. I think that they're going to declare, to fulfill the prophecy magic, they're going to declare peace, and then there's going to be like a couple years, and then there's going to be a major war. They want Gog and Magog to precede the Messianic age and the end times. So I think that's the formula. That's the there's another word I had for it. That's the narrative that they're going to go with, in my view.
Yeah, I see you're not more optimistic than me, so
I'm not.
You're not, right?
Yeah.
You're not. Yeah. I don't know where we're going, but I don't know. It's very scary. Yeah? The level of power now reached, by the level of Jewish power in all the different power structures, politically, culturally, is very, very impressive and very, very scary. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, Laurent, I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you for writing these books. I really enjoyed them. I highly advise everybody to check them out. Parting words to the audience, and where they can find your articles, your work, where they should follow you, all of that jazz, where they can get your books, linked below.
Well, anyway, I'm writing sometimes articles on the Unz review, of Ron Unz. So that's basically where I'm writing in English. I'm writing also in French, but in English that's what I'm writing. And and anyway, I want to thank you, Adam. I really enjoyed, and I really support your work. I feel, as you said, I feel we're really on the same. We have a very similar viewpoint.
Similar interests, definitely.
Similar interest, and also similar vision of the connection between the political and the religious. I think that's the very important aspect.
You cannot talk about Jews and you cannot talk about Israel without talking about religion, which kind of gives them this kind of protection that they're a race, a religion, and a state. So that's like they use that to try to shield themselves from any criticism.
Yeah, that's why your work is very important. I'm really happy you like my books, and thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, all the links for Laurent will be down in the description below on BitChute. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. And, of course, follow No More News, bookmark it, sign up for the email newsletter, pick up a T-shirt. What else? DLive, BitChute, brand new tube. And thanks to everybody for all the support. I can't do it without you. There's the contact page, the donate page, support independent media. We are under Zio Tyranny Assault Censorship, as you all know. So Thanks you all for watching. Thank you once again, Laurent. Stay on the line. We're going to play the outro, and I will see all of you guys again very soon. Take care.